Top 10 of the evilest serial killers you have ever known. One of the most widely known murders of the 20th century, Ted Bundy was an American serial killer and rapist who kidnapped and overpowered numerous young women and girls during the 1970s. Bundy typically approached his female victims in public places and led them to secluded areas where he would sexually assault and kill them. He decapitated at least 12 of his victims and kept their severed heads in his apartment as trophies. Repeatedly captured, he twice managed to escape from police and courthouses before going on to commit 3 further killings. Convicted of multiple murders, he was sentenced to death and was executed via the electric chair in 1989. Charles Ng and his accomplice Leonard Lake raped, tortured and murdered between 11 and 25 victims at Lake's ranch in Calaveras County, California. The crimes became known in 1985 when Lake committed suicide after being arrested and Ng was caught shoplifting at a hardware store. Police searched Lake's ranch and found human remains. Ng was identified as Lake's partner in crime and attempted to evade police by fleeing to Canada. After a lengthy extradition to the United States, he stood trial in 1998 on 12 counts of murder. He was convicted in 1999 and Ng is currently on death row at San Quentin State Prison. John Wayne Gacy sexually assaulted and murdered 33 teenage boys and young men in a series of killings between 1972 and 1978 in Chicago, Illinois. He lured his victims to his home with the promise of work and money before murdering them by strangulation with a tourniquet. Gacy buried 26 of his victims in the crawl space under his home. Before disposing of later victims in the Des Plaines River, convicted of 33 murders, Gacy was sentenced to death. He spent 14 years on death row before he was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. Andrei was a Soviet serial killer, nicknamed the Butcher of Rostov. He committed the sexual assault, murder and mutilation of at least 52 women and children in Russia between 1978 and 1990. Believing he was the serial killer, police carried out surveillance on Andrei, and which eventually provided adequate grounds to arrest him. He confessed to a total of 56 murders and was tried for 53 of those killings in April 1992. Victims' relatives demanded the authorities to release him so that they could kill him themselves. He was convicted and sentenced to death for 52 of these murders in October 1992 and executed by the firing squad in February 1994. Claiming to have killed at least 70 people, Tommy Lynn Sells is considered one of the most dangerous offenders in Texas and has been convicted of several brutal murders between 1985 and 1999, including stabbing a 13-year-old girl 16 times. Sells was eventually captured after breaking into a bedroom of a 10-year-old girl, stabbing her and leaving her for dead. Despite her injuries, the girl managed to survive and alert her neighbors. She provided a detailed description of Sells to police, which eventually led to his capture. Sentenced to death, he remains on death row at high security prison in Livingston, Texas. One of the United States' most prolific serial killers, Gary Ridgway, was arrested in 2001 for 4 murders. Though he confessed to killing at least 70 women in Washington state throughout the 1980s and 1990s, he avoided the death penalty by providing detailed confessions and leading police to the dumping site of his victims, 5 of whom he dumped in the Green River, which led to the press to the nickname the Green River Killer. He was convicted of 49 murders and sentenced to life in prison without the chances of parole. Pedro is a Brazilian serial killer. Arrested in 1973, he was later convicted in 2003 for murdering at least 71 people and sentenced to 128 years in prison. Although Brazilian law system prohibits anyone from spending more than 30 years behind bars, committing his first murder at the age of 14, Pedro began a series of burglaries and carried out a murdering spree against local drug dealers. By the age of 18 years old, he had killed 10 people. Whilst in prison, he executed his own father, who was also serving time for murder. Remarkably, he went on to kill at least 47 inmates while in prison. His continued killings led to further convictions, increasing his sentence to 400 years. However, he was later released from prison in 2007 after serving 34 years, but was later rearrested in 2011. Barbosa was a serial killer who was believed to have raped and killed over 150 girls in Colombia and Ecuador during the 1970s and 1980s. He confessed to killing 72 girls in Ecuador since escaping from the Colombian prison. After being arrested in Quito, he led authorities to the dumping grounds of those victims whose bodies had not yet been recovered. He was convicted in 1989 and sentenced to 16 years in prison, the maximum sentence available in Ecuador. In November 1994, he was murdered in prison by the cousin of one of his victims. Dr. Harold Frederick Shipman was an English doctor and is one of the world's most prolific serial killers in recorded history. Proven to have been responsible for up to 250 murders, a trusted doctor, he was well respected in his community. However, colleagues and local undertakers began raising concerns over the high death rate in the area and the large number of cremation forms for elderly women that he had countersigned. Several bodies were later exhumed and post-mortems revealed diamorphine within their systems. It was later established that Shipman had purposely injected fatal doses of the drug in a huge number of patients, causing their death. He then forged their wills so he could inherit large sums of money and completed cremation requests to destroy the victims' bodies. The trial judge sentenced him to 15 consecutive life sentences and recommended that he never be released. Shipman later hanged himself in January 2004 in his cell in the Wakefield prison. Pedro Alonso Lopez is a Colombian serial killer, accused of raping and killing more than 300 girls across South America. He lured them to secluded areas or inside unoccupied buildings where he raped each of them before killing them by a range of brutal methods, primarily strangulation. Lopez was arrested when an attempt abduction failed and he was trapped by market traders. He confessed to over 300 murders, but the police only believed him when a flash flood uncovered a mass grave containing many of his victims. Eventually, 53 bodies were discovered. Imprisoned in 1980, he served 18 years before being released from an Ecuadorian prison and was deported to Colombia, where he was rearrested and in 2002 was sentenced to life. We hope you enjoyed our top 10 most evilest serial killers you have ever known. Which one in our top 10 is the most evilest for you? Let us know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to turn on our post notification. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you with another top 10 video soon. Cheers.